Hello everyone, how's it going? My name is Ben, I'm 25 years old from Melbourne, Australia, and this is my story on how I moved to France from Australia just over a year ago. Now, this video is not intended to be a guide or a step-by-step on how to move to France or to another country in general, but essentially it's just me sharing my story, some of the reasons why I decided to move to France, how I moved there, and I'm actually back in Australia for the time being. And I'm going to talk about some of those decisions, that involved me moving back home and sort of why I did that later in the video. So if you are planning to move to France or, any country in general, and you kind of want some questions answered or you want to share something, feel free to drop a comment down below, or you can also message me on Instagram. I have a link to that in the description of this video. So just before I get started, I feel like for me, there are some sort of exceptions that make my experience a little bit different to maybe someone else has gone down this path. For one, I have a German passport, so it does make the whole visa situation less complicated. It's not to say that visas aren't great. I'll talk about that briefly in a second. But yeah, I think for me, having that passport just unlocked so many more opportunities and it made things, far more easier. But with that said, I'm going to talk about the reasons why I decided to move to France in the beginning. So essentially, I've been to France many times. I love the country. I do love the people. Many people have their gripes with the French. I think it's completely unjustified in lots of circumstances. I know the French are very different to lots of other people out there. But in my experience, I've had very few bad experiences in terms of dealing with the French. And overall, I've had a very positive time. I love the country, love the people, love the food, love the drink. Honestly, just a sick place. And I really just wanted to live there for at least a year, see how I would fit into that culture, see how that culture would kind of change me and maybe my ways of thinking. And ultimately, it was just, just want to see what would happen, really. For a long time, I have wanted to move abroad. I just didn't know where. And a few years ago, I did a big backpacking trip around most of Europe. And the intention of that trip was to kind of decide where maybe I would like to move someday. And I really just came down to Paris or Berlin. I love Berlin as well. I think it's a cool place. It's obviously a bit more intense in certain areas. I had to decide. And with Paris, I knew two people. In Berlin, I knew no one. I found accommodation in Paris very, very easily, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Whereas in Berlin, it was a lot more expensive and just more difficult in general. So why I moved to France, why I moved to Paris was I knew some people. I love France, I love Paris. And the kicker was just I found accommodation easier. As simple as that. I was thinking about studying at a certain point, which maybe helped me lean more towards the Paris option. But equally, I could have studied in Berlin too. So it was almost a very simple choice and it wasn't that deep. So in terms of getting a visa, as I said, I have a German passport. So I'm quite lucky in that regard. But that's not to say that if you don't have that, you're screwed. I had some friends that were just Australian passport holders, nothing else. And they were able to get a study visa, which essentially allowed them to work, I think 20 hours a week. And they were also studying French full time as well. The language school, most French language schools, I assume, will offer this kind of service where you pay 3-6 months up front, you do the 20-hour-a-week option, and they basically approve your visa for study reasons. I think it's just 1 year with the option to extend. And then, of course, I'm sure if you're there after a year, you probably want to get into something a bit more serious, or maybe you want to go to university, or maybe you want to jump on the working visa. That's obviously a personal choice. But I would just say if you're looking for a visa, maybe a study visa could be a good option. So in terms of finding accommodation, I think for me, once again, this is sort of, I wouldn't say luck, but it is sort of an exception to the overall circumstance. I had an Airbnb for 10 months, and I know that might sound crazy in terms of cost, but it actually wasn't so bad. So I booked my Airbnb a year in advance. This is when I knew I wanted to move to Paris, and I just wanted to get excited and kind of lock something in. I found an Airbnb that was 1,200 euros a month in Montmartre, 25 square meters, studio, included everything. And honestly, for me, that's a really, really good deal. I think that if you're like me, from the other side of the world, you don't know anything about the French rental market or, anything about rentals in general, Like for me, I've lived at home in Australia, so for me to move overseas, getting an Airbnb was just convenient. All the bills are covered, fully furnished. Any issues, I would go straight to the host, and it was sorted instantly. And then when I think about it, okay, so 1,200 euros, not cheap, but it's all right. Most of my friends were paying, say, 1,000 euros a month, 1,100 maybe, including bills. So for an extra 100 or 200 euros, just for like full convenience, not having to worry about anything, I think it's a great solution. But with that said, that was, 2 years ago now. So times have definitely changed. Things have gotten more expensive. I actually have checked this Airbnb again, just out of curiosity, and it has gone up a few $100s per month. But with that said, there are obviously good deals out there. I think it just takes some organization and some initiative. Do your research, take some time to really, suss out the options. I think Airbnb, as much as it does negatively impact the rental market, I think it's a good solution for short-term people moving abroad. But if you don't want to go down the Airbnb route and you want something a bit more social, I would recommend co-living. There's a site called Cohabs. I've never used it. Obviously have no affiliation with them. It's just something that it's popped up a fair few times, and I've kind of looked into it. So essentially, it's like an apartment building with, say, 15, 20 rooms. Most people have their own bathroom, toilet, and shower, and you share the kitchen and like some common areas. So it's basically like a very kind of fancy hostel with all private rooms. I think the minimum obligation is 6 months. I could be wrong. I think it depends on the city. But honestly, if you're moving and you don't know anyone, I think that could be a great way to firstly meet some people, and secondly, have that kind of community already there. And everything's sorted as well. Like your bills are covered, you have a bed, you have everything fully furnished, just like the Airbnb. I think it would be kind of interesting to explore. As I said, I've never done it myself, but I'm definitely curious to give it a go someday. I've seen there are a few in Marseille now, which I'm definitely thinking about for this coming summer. So I guess July this year, or potentially next year as well. So if you have actually stayed at these, I would be very keen to hear what it's like. So if that's you, definitely leave a comment down below. I'm very, very curious to see whether it's actually genuine or whether it's a bit hit and miss. So yeah, feel free to let me know. So there's also the option of like a share house, having some roommates. The website that is common is called Carte Caloc, I think. I'll put a link to all this stuff I'm talking about in the description. From memory, it was far easier to use that website to find a place to live. I think often people have a very quick turnaround in these rentals, and people want to get someone in, so the costs are shared around. So if you do, enjoy living with other people and you want to save some money, share houses could be a great option. I think it does integrate you more into the French way of life. Often you're living with other French people, which I think, it's probably better than living alone in a new place. I think for me, I really value living alone, but there were a lot of times where I felt quite alone, and that maybe negatively impacted my experience sometimes. So I think if I was to do it again, I would explore more the community living for the cohabs or a share house, just to have that kind of constant social interaction. Now, there's also the French rental market itself. If you want to rent, proper apartments by yourself, once again, I'll list all those websites below. But it is very, very difficult. You need a very, very good file. You need to have a well-paying job. You need French guarantors most of the time. Even a British guarantor or an Australian guarantor like your parents often won't cut it, no matter how much money they make. I think this official way of finding a place to live is very, very difficult. Even for a French person, it's extremely hard, extremely stressful, and you basically need so many things to be perfect. Otherwise, you have no chance. For me, it took me a few months to find a place, and it's so hard, and I probably wouldn't recommend it. If you're only going to stay for a year or 2 years, take the convenience, get an Airbnb, cohabs, share house, something that's not such a big commitment, especially if you don't speak French as well. Most of these real estates, often all of them, will be doing all their business dealings in French. Most of them probably actually can speak English, but it just makes things just so much more harder. If you want convenience, there's definitely better options out there. But if you are looking to stay maybe more long term and you want some more commitment, then getting a proper rental is obviously probably the best bet. But yeah, as I said, it's a lot of headaches and sometimes maybe not always worth it, depending on how long you want to stay. So in terms of cost of living, this will be different for everyone in terms of what you're into and you kind of budget on certain things. For me, coming from Australia, I was working obviously an Australian job, Australian wage, so I had pretty good savings when I moved away. I felt like things were in general pretty, I wouldn't say affordable, but they were a lot cheaper than Australia. But when you factor in the wages in France, I do see how cost of living is quite high. Just for reference, not to try and sound like an alcoholic, but for the price of a beer, for most places in Paris, I would say like 8 or 9 euros at like the stock standard kind of, restaurants, cafes, stuff like that. But for the most part, I was finding places where it was like, 3.50, 4 euros. Not the best beer you ever have in your life, but still, pretty cheap. So there are kind of ways around the cost of living there. Obviously, if you're shopping at Lidl or Aldi, it's far cheaper than Carrefour or Monoprix, which is one of the more expensive shops. So I think you just have to kind of do your research, be sensible on your purchases. If you're living abroad, like you have to be, more frugal in general, I think, especially if you're not working or maybe you're working a lower paid job. You definitely have to be, just more cautious and really track what you're spending. Because I think if you're not, working full time, you have so many other options to just go out, go party, go traveling, and that money can go really, really fast. My advice would be as frugal as you can while still enjoying yourself. There are always cheaper alternatives out there for shops, for nightlife, stuff like that. And I think living in Paris is great because there are so many things you can do for free. Even just grabbing some beers and going down to the river for a night, like to me that sounds great. In Melbourne, I would never really do that. It's not as common. I mean, you can't even drink in public here, whereas in France you can. So there are kind of ways around it. And I think that's one of the best parts about living in France. It's just the freedom you have to enjoy really, really cheap, often free experiences. So in terms of cultural differences, I would say there are a fair few, but for the most part, at the end of the day, Australia and France, both kind of Western countries, we have the same values to an extent. I think France is definitely more a culturally rich country. It's been around a lot longer, so it's more developed in a culture sense. For me, Australian culture, I think it's very overrated. Doesn't suit me at all. It's not to say that I don't enjoy living here. I think Australia is a great place to live. I just think Australian culture is not the most wholesome. I think most Australians watching this video will probably agree with me on that. Maybe controversial, don't know. But yeah, anyways, French culture, I think it's, more rich. There's more things to explore. Their food scene, their drink scene, their history as well. It's amazing. But in terms of just day-to-day life, cultural differences, I would say in Paris, at least, say you go to the shops, people aren't very talkative, even in French. Like you go to the supermarket, talking to the cashier just doesn't really exist. Maybe it does, I just never saw it. Whereas here, I can go to Woolies or go to Coles and I can talk to the person behind the desk and it's fine, it's normal, they're chatty. Even though it's small talk, I actually still kind of prefer that. Versus in France, you just get absolutely nothing. And that can be kind of jarring in a way. If you're living alone and you have no one to kind of talk to, I know it's going to sound a bit weird, but sometimes going to the shops and just like talking to someone, it's kind of, I don't know, it's nice. But when you don't have that, you kind of just, you feel a bit isolated. So that kind of thing kind of shocked me in the beginning. So in terms of making friends, I think this is maybe a cultural difference. I think the French, and if you're French watching this video, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I think the French really closely hold on to their long-term friendships and they are less likely to branch out and kind of make new connections as they get older. And I've heard this from my friends as well who said that they are less likely to do that. As a foreigner, it does make it harder to kind of jump into a group and kind of meet French people. I had some French friends and they're the most amazing people. But with that said, I feel like because my circumstances involved already knowing a few people there and made that side of things easier. But in terms of, say, me making friends with a French person on my own terms, like it just didn't happen. And it's not for the lack of trying. I think it's just the way things work in Paris. It's a very intense, very busy place, which I like. I know that's often a criticism for most people, but yeah, it definitely brings a certain energy where you don't really feel comfortable approaching someone, especially in English. Like if you can speak French, it probably helps a little bit, but if you can only speak English or a little bit of French, it makes making friends very, very difficult. For me, the best friend I made was a British guy. He's an absolute boy. Became best friends basically because we had shared experiences. He did exactly the same thing I did a few years back, so we were able to connect on so many different areas. He's obviously further into the journey than I was at the time. So for me, it was great to have that person to kind of look up to and kind of guide me through, living in France. But if you can make French friends, honestly, that's so good. I would just say it's harder than we probably expect, and that's okay. Don't put that on yourself. Just understand that's the nature of, living in Paris and living in France. But yeah, I do wish you all the best with that side of things, because I think once you do make those connections, the French are actually the sickest people. They're so cool, so welcoming, very, very chill. I feel like in France, and once again, correct me if I'm wrong, the French just talk about life in general. They're not talking about their jobs or anything overly political, maybe depending on the group. Whereas in Australia, I feel like the conversations we have, I don't know, not quite the same. I'm not sure what I'm trying to get at here. Maybe you can relate. If you can connect the dots somewhere, that's great. Another difference I've found, I feel like guys and girls in France can be friends, and it's like completely normal. Even if both of them in relationships, it's fine. In Australia, I feel like it's way less likely to have guy and girl friends. I'm not sure like at what point this becomes a thing. I just feel like in France, from a young age, they're just kind of more mixed, maybe. I don't know. I felt like it was something I just observed a lot, where you go to a party and everyone's mixing, whereas sometimes I go to a party in Australia and it's like the guys are in one corner, the girls are in one corner, there's some crossover, but for the most part, it's just like there's like two groups going on. And in France, I never saw that. It was just, everyone just would just talk to everyone. It didn't matter who you were. And I think that's a really, really nice thing. And it's something in Australia that I've never really quite understood. There's no explanation for it. I've obviously never looked into it. But yeah, that's just something that's just something I observed, and I thought it was quite interesting. So in terms of the language barrier, obviously this is a challenge. Learning French is probably, I would say it's pretty necessary if you want to have the best time possible. I'd really recommend joining a language school as soon as you can. They're not too expensive. For me, I was paying 750 euros for 3 months. It was 2 hours a day, and you can start from A1 all the way to C1, maybe B2. And I think it's just a great way to firstly meet people. You know, most of these people come from all over the world. Some of them can't even speak English, so it's actually great because you're forced to only speak French instead of relying on your native tongue. Secondly, it gives you routine. You know, if you're moving to France and you have nothing to do, just showing up for 2 hours a day makes you feel so much better, so much, better for your mental health and feeling like you belong somewhere. And being able to learn a language from scratch in that country, I feel like you learn more efficiently, and you can actually put that to use after leaving the classroom. And this in turn will also help you, find a job. I feel like most workplaces won't hire you unless you have a certain level of French, maybe apart from some like Irish pubs or hostel bars, which is where I was working for a little bit. But yeah, for the most part, learn French I wouldn't say as quick as you can, just do it as soon as you can, if that makes sense. You won't regret it. The skills you have for life, hopefully. And yeah, it'll just make your integration far more seamless, I think. Because the language barrier is tough. It's really, really hard, especially if maybe Paris is okay. People say the French don't speak English. In my experience in Paris, it was fine. Like most of the time when my Australian friends would come and visit, they would be speaking English to the staff, and they were chill I think people have this thing where if you speak English in France, they're going to be really like pissy with you. In my experience, not at all. As long as you address them in French in the beginning, and then maybe ask them like, do you speak English? Or I'm sorry, I can't speak French. Do you speak English? That's all you have to do. And then it's fine, you know? And maybe that's not advice to people watching this video, but I would maybe offer that advice to my friends and family coming to visit. I think that's just a very polite way of engaging with someone where you can't really speak the language, or maybe you have some kind of miscommunication somewhere along the line. But yeah, essentially learn French as quick as you can. So as soon as you can, and your time will be more enjoyable. So I guess sort of in addition to that, jobs and work life, finding a job is very, very hard as a non-French speaker, or even like an beginner, intermediate French speaker. There isn't really a job market for international people who can just speak English. I imagine if you went to, say, the Netherlands, you could probably find a good job, far easier, provided you had the right skills and experience. And obviously the UK, same as Australia. But France, it's very much necessary for you to speak almost perfect French for a good job, I'm saying. Have the right master's degrees, have some experience internships at French companies. So if you don't have that, like I didn't, you're very much relegated to a very specific line of work. Often that's like bar, cafe, any kind of hospitality work. I almost got a retail job. I didn't go through with it in the end. It was just certain timings didn't work out great. But with that, it was just an exception. I was really friendly with the owner, and I told him my French level, and he was very welcoming. He was like, okay, your French isn't great, but it could be a great chance for you to practice. And I was so keen to work there. But yeah, just the way things worked out, I couldn't commit to that. But for the most part, all the other retail shops I went in, they were like, no, you have to speak French, which I completely understand. If you're dealing with someone who can't speak English, they might get a bit, salty with you if you can't kind of communicate back to them. Because after all, you are in France. So yeah, bar work, some people find it fun. I found it fun for a bit, but I felt the lifestyle was very unhealthy. Lots of late nights, lots of drinking, and the money isn't great. So just so many consequences that you have to deal with, and you kind of just feel crap all the time. That's just me. I think because I have worked, more full-time office jobs in the past, I think going back to that more hospitality, retail kind of work, it's quite an adjustment, especially for a very low wage. And yeah, it's not always that rewarding. So in terms of navigating French life, I'm going to start with banking first. French banking is probably quite difficult. I wouldn't really recommend going down that route straight away. What I would suggest is joining a bank, like an online bank like Revolut. That's what I had. It was very easy to set up. Obviously I have like a French kind of account, so it has the French banking system. Just made it easier for when I had a job. I had all the right, numbers and accounts, stuff like that. Revolut was also great because I could transfer between my friends and all their French banks. Obviously I have no affiliation with Revolut, but it's very, very common across the world. So I would suggest get that, as soon as you can. Do it when you are in France. That way you have the French account. I think it's just probably more tailored to employability, which is great. And then I always had my Wise, which is like another online bank for travel. I think that's an Australian company though. So yeah, I like to have just multiple options just in case, one goes down or I run out of money on one, I have another as a backup. But yeah, Revolut is great. In terms of getting a phone, I just got a phone plan with SFR. It's one of the main kind of telecommunications in France. They were pretty good. I think I was paying like 20 euros a month or 30. I know it jumped up at a certain point, like 100 gigs. And I did that for just over a year. It was great. And I was able to cancel very easily as well. Actually, it was easier for me to cancel my phone than it was for me to cancel my gym membership, which is crazy. If you are into gym, Basic Fit, it's pretty good. Probably my favorite because it's so cheap. And it has everything you need, and they're all across the country. N&S is double the price. Some of them are good, some of them are not so good. I find the equipment to be quite limiting sometimes. But yeah, not so bad. And there's Fitness Park, which is like somewhere in the middle. Also not too bad, but yeah, I think Basic Fit, it's so cheap, and yeah, I think it's kind of worth looking into. and they're in most areas too. So yeah, if you want some gym or any kind of exercise, that's another thing. As soon as you get to France, join a gym, join a language school, try and find a job. They're the three things I'd recommend. That way your routine is locked in a sense, metaphorical sense, and you have just have some kind of purpose. I think that goes a long way. And of course, in terms of getting like the metro, you have the Navigo cards. You can get like the 90 euros a month card, but unless you're using the train twice a day, it's probably not worth it. So honestly, I was just using the tap on, tap off, pay as you go type system. And yeah, it was great. I think it was like €2.50 for a one way. Maybe it's changed now. But yeah, not too bad. Trains are so good in France. Like maybe if you're French, you think they're shit. But for me as an Australian, our transportation system is awful. The metro system is great in France, very quick. There's trains every like 3-4 minutes. The lines are very well connected. And for the most part, I'd say pretty safe, apart from some certain stations. But yeah, I would recommend, yes, getting the Navigo, like pay as you go. It's great. Line bikes are good. I use them pretty often, or even just riding a bike in general. If you just get a cheap bike off Marketplace or eBay, whatever, you can save so much money on public transportation or Ubers and stuff like that. But yeah, Paris is a very interconnected city, so you shouldn't have any issues getting around. So if I had to share some advice to those who are watching who are maybe moving abroad soon, this is France specific, but maybe you can kind of take things here and there. The first thing I would say is, yeah, what I said before of like having a routine in terms of class, gym, Pilates, whatever, and then find a job. They're the three things that are, I think, absolutely essential. I would also recommend trying to find a team of some sort, more like a sports team or like a run club. As an Australian, like AFL, there's like an AFL France league that I think is pretty easy to join. And I didn't join it just out of laziness and probably out of fear, to be honest. I was just like, I don't even know where that's going to be. It's going to be kind of weird. I haven't played footy in like 10, 15 years. But now looking back on it, that would have been such a great way to meet people, probably similar people, some Australians, some French, and just have that kind of community aspect week in, week out. Even run clubs too. Run clubs are very, very popular in France, just like most places in the world. They're pretty easy to find. I remember one time I was at Panam Brewery and there was like a run club there every 2 weeks. Just spoke to the bar staff and they sorted it out. Once again, I'm so lazy. I didn't join and I regretted it. And now I'm just like, why didn't I do it? I would have met so many people, would have had a very wholesome activity. And yeah, it would have been a great way to further integrate into life in Paris. My next bit of advice, I would say, is to sort of maybe understand at what point you want to not leave, but have some kind of rough plan, okay? If you're going to go away for, say, a year, be like, okay, I'm starting this day and I'm 100% ending this day, with the option to maybe extend or change your plans. I think that's a really good thing. I think obviously having an EU passport is great, but what it does is it gives you almost too much freedom. You don't have to work, you don't have to study to remain there. So you kind of just fart around for so long because you can. And for me, I felt like I just wasted so much time because I had no constraints, I had no limitations, I had no end point. I always kept it pretty open, which is great. But at the same time, I feel like I wasn't as productive as I could have been. You know, now when I look back on it, if I had have said, okay, I'm going to start in January, finish by December, I think I would have mapped things out a bit better and I wouldn't have wasted as much time in the beginning. So yeah, I would just say, if you're going to go away, maybe go away with some kind of intention. You don't have to have this big grand purpose of what you want to achieve, because I definitely didn't have that. But I think just kind of plan some things you really want to do or you really want to achieve. And I think that'll make your experience, more worthwhile. So there's lots of love in France. I think it's a great country. There's so much to do. There's different landscapes, so many great cities to visit. And you're also so close to other parts of Europe as well. Food's great, drinks great. The people are pretty good. I would say they're great. People will disagree. But I think overall, France is an amazing country and I had the best time ever there. But with that said, I am back in Australia for the time being. Essentially, towards the end, I felt like I was getting very, very burnt out. I was working full-time, studying full-time, and I felt like the joy I had in the beginning just was no longer there. And that kind of made me feel like I was wasting my time a little bit. I didn't want to overstay in the hopes that things would improve. I already did that for a few months, and I felt like my life wasn't changing that much. It was approaching winter, or actually it already was winter, and I was just ready for something new. And it was summer in Australia, so I was like, fuck, let's just go back, reset, rethink things, save some money, and then we can kind of decide, or I can decide where I want to go next in my life. There's lots of traveling I want to do, and I think by me staying in France, it would have made traveling very, very difficult because the money is so much harder to save. And the alternative is I can come back to Australia, save a lot more, and then go out and do it all again, say later this year or next year. I think that I achieved most of the things I wanted to in France, and I felt like I was just kind of repeating myself towards the end. And now that I've come back home, I've had a chance to kind of reset and reflect. I think about all the things that I wish I had done differently and wish I had have improved on. And that's sort of why I decided to make these videos, was because I felt like I had lots to say, but in the moment, I didn't have any of that. These are all kind of hindsight thoughts, if you will. So yeah, I'm very happy to be back in Australia. I feel consistently more happy. I think when you move abroad, the highs are high and the lows are really, really low. And nothing can quite prepare you for that feeling. You kind of just have to confront it and deal with it. However you deal with those kinds of issues. Everyone's going to be different. But yeah, for me now, I'm working a good job. I feel very content, but equally, I'm more eager to explore other parts of the world. I still want to move back to France. Like, it's not a dream that's just finished. Even though that chapter is done, it's not to say that I won't ever go back. I really want to go back to Marseille, to be honest. Marseille was sick. Had a great time there. I think I went 4 times last year. And I have looked at accommodation options there for the summer. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, for the time being, I wouldn't say necessarily happy, but I'm happy with the choice I made to come back home at that time, if that makes sense. One of the best decisions I ever made was to move to France. But what I've said to myself recently is probably the next best decision was knowing when to call it. As I said, you don't want to overstay something with the hopes that things will get better and your life will dramatically change, because often it's just not true. So yeah, I'm very content with the life I have in Australia. Friends, family, good wage. I feel very blessed to have that back again. But it also makes me kind of reminisce on the last year. And yeah, it was the best time. So if you are about to move to France, I know some people watching my videos, or most actually are, which makes sense. This is a moving abroad kind of channel. I would say just have the best time, but make the most of your time as well. Like, try not to waste it. Have some intention with your day-to-day interactions and activities and the friends you meet, and just enjoy life. Like, if you just do this for 1 year or 6 months, that's fine. I think this will be a very definitive point in your life of transformation, maybe. Very pivotal moment. So yeah, I would say go for it, enjoy it, take some risks, and most importantly, just have fun and live your best life. So that's basically my experience moving to France, on the reasons why I moved, how I moved, and obviously, the reasons why I kind of decided to come back home for the short term. I hope it was useful. If you have any questions, like I said, or any stories, thoughts, definitely drop a comment down below. But you can always DM me on Instagram. Not the most responsive, but yeah, that option is always there. And if you have any, topics you want me to cover in future videos, feel free to also let me know. This video was quite vague in certain areas. I didn't really want to get too specific on certain things. I'm open to talk about any of that, just some of them a bit more personal, maybe boring for a wider audience. But anyways, thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Cheers.